The night was quiet. Too quiet. The palace of Virelia Prime floated like a glass jewel above the dark plains. Its towers shone with pale blue lights like stars trapped inside crystal. The alien queen's people had always believed their palace would never fall. They thought their sky walls were strong. They thought their army was enough. They were wrong. Far above the clouds, something moved. At first, no one saw it. Then the silent black ships broke through the mist, like shadows tearing the sky open. No lights, no warning, only the cold shape of war approaching. Inside the palace control room, a soft alarm beeped. One of the alien guards yawned. Another checked the radar. Their faces turned pale. "Contact," one of them whispered. Not friendly. In less than 30 seconds, the alarm became a scream. Red lights flashed through the long golden halls. Walls shook. The sky itself seemed to burn as the enemy ships entered the atmosphere. The enemy had arrived. Down in the main hall, Commander Ethan Cole lifted his head at the sound. He was human. The only human in the palace, Ethan was not a hero. Not in his own eyes. He was a soldier who had seen too much death, too many lost battles. He had joined the Queen's Guard for one reason. She had saved him when no one else would. He owed her his life. Now, as the alarms echoed like thunder, Ethan stood up from the bench where he had been sitting, thinking about the past. His boots hit the floor with a hard sound. He didn't need anyone to tell him what was happening. He already knew. The war had come to Virelia. The Queen's private hall was at the center of the palace. High ceilings, long mirrors, golden pillars that reached the roof like frozen fire. It was beautiful, but tonight it felt cold and empty. The Queen sat alone on her throne, staring at a star map. Her silver crown glimmered softly. Her people had trusted her to keep them safe. But now she could feel something heavy in the air, a fear too big to ignore. Her personal guard ran into the hall. "My queen." "The fleet! They've broken through the sky barrier!" For a moment, the Queen said nothing. Then she stood. "Prepare the royal escape." In the outer corridors, hundreds of soldiers rushed through doors and narrow halls. Some shouted orders. Some carried weapons. But in their eyes there was fear. Everyone knew this wasn't a normal attack. The enemy fleet was stronger than anything they had ever faced. They were known as the Draviks, cold and silent killers. When they arrived on a world, they didn't leave survivors. Everyone in the galaxy feared them. One by one, the palace guards began to break. Some ran to their posts. Others ran away. It started small. Then panic grew like fire. Ethan walked slowly down the hall toward the Queen's chamber. He saw the fear in their eyes. He saw the way they pushed past each other, dropping their weapons, trying to find a way out. He didn't stop them. He didn't shout at them. He just kept walking. He had seen panic before, and he knew what it meant. The battle was already lost for most of them. When Ethan entered the throne room, the Queen turned to him. Her long silver cloak moved like water. Her eyes were calm, but behind that calm he could see the storm. "They are here," she said quietly. "Yes," Ethan answered. "They will not spare anyone. I know." She looked down at her hands. For a moment, the powerful Queen looked like a lost child. "Ethan, you should leave too." He shook his head slowly. "No." Outside, the first explosions shook the palace. Enemy cannons ripped through the outer walls. The ground trembled as towers fell into smoke. The Dravik ships moved like dark blades through the night, surrounding the palace from every side. Their landing craft fell like black stars toward the ground. The Queen's guards gathered around her throne. Their commander shouted, "We must evacuate her now!" But then another explosion hit closer. One of the guards fell to the floor, blood running from his forehead. The others looked at each other. Fear again. Sharp, cold. One by one, they began to step back. Ethan watched as the Queen's own soldiers began to run away. They pushed open the back doors. Some dropped their weapons. Others shouted apologies. The commander didn't stop them. He was the first to run. The Queen stood frozen. "They're leaving me." Ethan stepped forward and placed himself between her and the great doors. Outside, the sky was burning. "They're not leaving you," he said. "They're running from death." Her voice trembled. "And you? Why are you still here?" Ethan's face was calm, but his heart was a storm. Because I made a promise. 1 year earlier, Ethan had been a broken soldier. His world was gone. His people had abandoned him. It was the Queen who had saved him from the slave mines. She had offered him food, a bed, and a place among her guards. No one else had trusted him. But she did. I won't forget, he had told her then. Now standing between her and the fire outside, he meant it. The palace began to shake again. Cracks spread across the marble floor. Blue dust fell from the ceiling like snow. "They are coming," Ethan said quietly. The Queen whispered, "Then this is the end." He looked at her. No, not yet. The palace control screens flickered as the first enemy troops landed. They moved fast, black armor, glowing red visors, silent as shadows. The Draviks were known for killing fast without mercy. They were not coming to capture the Queen. They were coming to erase her. In the throne room, Ethan picked up his rifle. He checked the power cell. Then he dropped his helmet and let it hit the floor. He wanted the enemy to see his face. The Queen watched him. Her voice was soft, almost broken. "You are only one man," he gave a small smile. "That's enough." The Queen's hands were shaking. Not because she didn't believe him, but because no one had ever stayed before. In her long rule, she had seen people kneel before her, praise her, swear loyalty. But the moment danger came, they ran. Every time, but this human, he stayed. For the first time in years, something warm moved in her chest. It wasn't hope, not yet, but something close. Outside, enemy ships began to fire again. The palace shields were falling. Alarms screamed louder. A young alien messenger ran into the throne room, tears on his face. "My Queen, please, come with me. We have one ship left. We can escape." The Queen looked at Ethan. His blue eyes didn't move. "I'm not going," she said finally. The messenger froze. "But leave," Ethan said firmly. The boy ran away. The silence in the hall was broken only by the rumble of distant explosions. Smoke filled the air. The Queen slowly walked down from her throne and stood next to Ethan. She looked small beside him, fragile but proud. "If I die here," she whispered, "at least I won't die running." Ethan didn't look at her. His eyes were on the big doors at the end of the hall. "Good." The floor shook again. Dust fell from the ceiling. The doors rattled. They were close now. On the horizon, thousands of black soldiers moved through the smoke. Their boots crushed the white marble of the palace steps. No sound, no mercy, just the cold march of death. One of their commanders raised a hand. The soldiers stopped. The massive door of the throne room was the last wall between the Queen and the enemy. Inside, Ethan stood still, his rifle ready. His heartbeat was steady. He had no plan to win, but he had something stronger than fear, a promise. "They'll break through soon," the Queen said. "I know," he answered. "You'll die here." He gave a small nod. "Probably," she whispered. "Why?" He finally turned to look at her. "Because you believed in me when no one else did." "I won't run." Outside the door, the enemy began to gather. Heavy metal feet, cold dark armor, red eyes shining in the dark like blood. Ethan took a deep breath. He wasn't a legend. He wasn't a chosen hero. He was just one man with a gun standing between an army and a queen, but that was enough. The Queen stepped back toward the throne, her fingers tightening on the golden armrest. She didn't beg him to escape. She didn't order him to leave. She simply said, "Ethan?" He looked over his shoulder. "Thank you." The doors shook. As the enemy slammed against them, 1, 2, 3 times, splinters of crystal and gold fell to the ground. The final battle hadn't started yet. But everyone knew. The moment the door broke, the world would change. Ethan lifted his weapon and whispered to himself, "Come on then." The Queen closed her eyes. The palace groaned. The doors cracked. The enemy had arrived. And Ethan Cole, the last defender, did not run. The great doors of the throne room shook again. The sound was deep and heavy, like the heartbeat of a dying world. Dust fell from the ceiling, swirling in the cold air as if the palace itself was holding its breath. Ethan Cole stood in the center of the room with his weapon ready, eyes fixed on the door. His muscles were tight, but his face was calm. He had made a choice long before tonight. Behind him, the queen sat on her throne. The soft blue light from the broken windows painted her face in shadows. Outside, the war had already begun. The Dravik ships circled the sky like vultures around a dying animal. Ethan didn't feel fear. He felt something heavier. Something that had lived inside him since the day she saved him. A promise. A year ago, he had been someone else. Back then, the world smelled like iron and fire. The air in the mines was thick with smoke and dirt. He was a prisoner, just one of hundreds, digging in the dark for the Draviks. His skin was burned. His hands were broken. His hope was gone. He wasn't a soldier anymore. He was just a man waiting to disappear. The prisoners around him had long stopped speaking. They were too tired, too empty. Every day was the same. Work, pain, sleep, work again. Hope was a ghost that had died a long time ago. Ethan had accepted it. He didn't fight anymore. He didn't care. He was alive, but not living. And then she came. The day had started like every other. The guards shouted. The machines roared. The chains rattled. But then something strange happened. The alarms sounded. Not the usual alarms. These were sharper, faster, almost afraid. The Dravik soldiers rushed toward the surface. No one told the prisoners what was happening. They didn't need to. It was war again. The heavy steel door opened with a scream. Smoke filled the tunnel. And out of that smoke, a figure walked. She wore silver armor that caught the torchlight like a blade. Her long white cloak flowed behind her as if it belonged to the wind. Her eyes burned like stars trapped in human shape. The Draviks had always been monsters, but she was light. The Queen of Virelia entered the mine like she owned it. Her soldiers followed, their blue armor glowing in the dark. The Draviks tried to fight, but their resistance was nothing. One after another, they fell under the bright fire of her troops. In minutes, the entire mine was silent. Ethan stood in his cell as the locks clicked open. Prisoners screamed and ran into the tunnels. They didn't care where. They just wanted out. But Ethan didn't move. He stared at her like a man seeing the sun for the first time. She stepped closer, her boots echoing against the metal floor. There was no fear in her eyes, only purpose. When she stood in front of him, she raised her hand and said in a calm, steady voice, "You can run, or you can live." Ethan didn't understand. Her words were simple, but no one had ever spoken to him like that. She wasn't ordering him. She was offering him something, a choice, something he thought was lost forever. She tilted her head slightly, waiting. "I'm not asking for loyalty," she said softly. "I'm giving you a chance." Ethan could have walked away. He could have followed the crowd. But for some reason, he didn't. There was something in her eyes, not pity, not kindness exactly. Something stronger. Trust. She didn't know him, but she trusted him. His hands trembled as he reached out. And when her hand closed around his, something in him came back to life. That was the moment everything changed. Time moved forward like a river. The mines became a memory buried in darkness. Ethan learned to stand again. He became a guard in the Queen's palace. At first, the others looked at him with suspicion. A human among aliens, a former prisoner among soldiers. They whispered behind his back. But the Queen didn't care. She trained him, trusted him, and placed him where no one else would, at her side. The palace became a strange kind of home. Its glass towers reflected the light of 1,000 stars. At night, he would walk along the high balconies and look out at the galaxy. It still felt too big, too cold, but it no longer felt empty. Sometimes the Queen would join him on those walks. She didn't speak much. She didn't have to. Her silence was full of meaning. One night, as they looked at the stars together, she said something he would never forget. "I don't need soldiers who kneel. I need soldiers who stay." He didn't answer, but those words carved themselves into his soul like a scar. He had already decided. If war came, if fear came, if everyone else ran, he would stay. And war did come. The Queen had warned her council that the Draviks would return one day. Many didn't believe her. Some laughed, some left, but she didn't bend. She had seen their darkness before. She knew it wasn't over, and now, here they were. Ethan blinked, pulling himself out of the memory. The throne room returned around him, the broken windows, the cold wind, the sound of footsteps outside. He adjusted his grip on the rifle and stepped forward, just a little, like a stone facing the flood. The queen stood slowly from her throne. The silver crown on her head gleamed in the dim light. She looked at him with quiet eyes. There were no royal orders, no speeches, just a single shared understanding. "You're still here," she whispered. "I told you I would be," he replied. She took a breath that sounded almost like relief. "Most of my people have already run." "I'm not most people." A distant explosion shook the floor beneath their feet. One of the windows shattered. Cold air rushed in, carrying the smell of burning metal and ash. Somewhere in the palace, alarms wailed like dying creatures. The queen stepped closer to him. "You can still escape." Ethan shook his head slowly. "No. Why?" she asked. Her voice was soft but heavy. He looked straight at her. "Because you didn't leave me." Her eyes flickered, and for a second she didn't look like a queen. She looked like a woman carrying a kingdom on her shoulders. The palace trembled again. Outside, the sound of Dravik war machines grew louder. Ethan had fought wars before. He had faced enemies stronger than him. But this wasn't about strength. This was about a promise made under the stars. A young palace worker burst into the throne room, out of breath. "They've entered the lower halls," he cried. "The guards. They're gone." Ethan didn't even blink. "Then we fight here." "You can't win," the boy shouted. "There are hundreds of them." Ethan's voice was calm. "Then they'll have to go through me." The boy stared at him as if looking at someone insane, then turned and ran into the smoke. The queen watched the boy disappear. She looked back at Ethan. "You really meant it." "I don't break promises." Her lips trembled into the smallest, saddest smile. "I've had soldiers swear loyalty to me 100 times. But when the enemy came, they all left. You are the first who stayed." He didn't know how to answer that, so he said nothing. Outside, the Draviks were moving closer. Their footsteps had a rhythm. Slow. Heavy. Certain. The rhythm of creatures who knew they were winning. The queen's cloak shifted behind her as the wind blew through the broken windows. "Do you fear death, Ethan?" she asked. He looked at the door. "No, I fear breaking my word." The first shadow passed behind the cracked door. A tall, dark shape with burning red eyes. Another followed. Then another. Ethan took one deep breath and placed himself in front of the throne. His boots pressed against the cold marble. His shoulders squared. The queen stepped down from her throne and stood behind him. She was not running. "Not anymore. I saved your life once," she said quietly. "Why?" He didn't turn. "Because you saw something in me no one else did." Her voice lowered. "Do you know what I saw?" "No." She stepped closer. "You didn't run. Even in chains, even broken, you didn't run." The sound outside grew louder. The Draviks were at the door now. They would break it soon. It didn't matter. Ethan wasn't going anywhere. The queen's breath brushed his shoulder. "Whatever happens, the stars will remember." Ethan didn't reply. He didn't need to. The door shook violently. Once, twice. Cracks spread like veins of black across its golden surface. The shadows grew larger. Their glowing red eyes stared in. Ethan's finger rested lightly on the trigger. His heart didn't race. It slowed. Every beat was clear and strong. A long time ago, he had nothing. Now he had a promise. And a promise was enough. The queen didn't speak again. She just stood behind him. The alien queen who had saved a broken human, and the human who had chosen to stay. The door shuddered again. The light flickered. The night outside roared like a beast. But inside, two figures stood against the darkness. One queen, one human, one promise. The enemy would come through that door. But they would not find fear. They would find Ethan Cole, and Ethan Cole did not run. The first blow to the throne room door sounded like thunder tearing through the sky. A long, hard, metallic boom filled the palace, rolling through the halls like the growl of some great monster. The sound didn't end quickly. It echoed deep and alive. Ethan Cole didn't flinch. He stood a few meters from the door, the barrel of his rifle pointing straight ahead. His breathing was calm, steady. This was the moment he had been waiting for. The night had grown darker outside, and smoke crept slowly through the broken windows like ghostly fingers. The Queen stood behind him. She said nothing, but he could feel her presence, not as a ruler now, but as someone who refused to hide. The shadows outside shifted again. The enemy was close, very close. Another strike. The gold-lined crystal door cracked like ice under a hammer. Pieces fell to the marble floor. The enemy didn't rush. They were patient. They enjoyed the fear that usually came before the kill. But this time, there was no fear in the hall, only silence. Ethan remembered the mines the moment the Queen had reached out to him. He remembered the promise. He had been a broken man once, but not anymore. Now he was a wall. A single human wall between an army and a queen. The third hit came harder. A long, sharp tear opened in the middle of the door. Through it, Ethan saw a flash of red light. The burning eyes of the Draviks. He could hear their breathing now. It wasn't like human breathing. It was rough and heavy like metal grinding against stone. The kind of sound that made most men run. Ethan took one step forward. The Queen watched him carefully, but she didn't stop him. She knew there was no turning back. Outside, the Dravik commander raised its weapon. Its soldiers fell into perfect formation. They didn't need words. They moved like a single beast. Their armor was black and hard like stone, glowing faintly at the edges. They were the hunters of worlds, and tonight they had come to finish one more. The fourth hit made the door bend. The throne room filled with the sharp crack of shattering crystal. A cold wind swept in, carrying the smell of burnt air and smoke. The Queen's cloak moved like silver fire in the draft. Ethan adjusted the grip on his rifle. His right hand had stopped shaking years ago. His left hand moved automatically to the side of his belt. A knife rested there. Not much against soldiers like these, but it wasn't just a weapon. It was a reminder. He would fight until the very last breath. One of the enemy soldiers shouted something in their guttural language. The commander raised its hand. The next strike came like a hammer of war. The door exploded inward. Shards of gold and crystal scattered like deadly rain. The sound was deafening. The great entrance that once symbolized peace and power now lay broken in pieces at Ethan's feet. The first Dravik soldier stepped inside. Tall, armored. Its eyes glowed like coals pulled from a dying fire. Behind it came more, 5, then 10, then more shadows filling the doorway. Their boots hit the floor in perfect rhythm. The hall trembled beneath them. Ethan raised his weapon slowly, without fear. The Queen didn't speak. Her hands gripped the edges of her throne, but she didn't run. She had made her choice, too. The soldiers stopped at the far end of the room. For a moment, both sides looked at each other. No one moved. It was the stillness before the storm. Ethan's blue eyes locked with the commander's red ones. It tilted its head, studying him. A single human standing in front of their army. It must have thought he was foolish or brave, or both. The commander made a sound, half growl, half laugh. Then it gave the order. The soldiers moved forward like a wave. Ethan pulled the trigger. The rifle roared like thunder. The first bullet of plasma cut through the smoky air and struck the leading soldier in the chest. Its armor cracked and it fell backward. The wave slowed for a second, surprised. That second was all Ethan needed. He moved like a soldier who had nothing left to lose. His shots were fast, sharp, and deliberate. One fell, then another, then a third. But the Draviks didn't stop. They never stopped. For each one he dropped, 2 more pushed through the broken doorway. The palace floor shook under their boots. The Queen rose from her throne and stepped behind one of the tall marble pillars. She wasn't hiding, she was watching. Her power was not in fighting. It was in standing her ground. The first soldier reached him. Ethan sidestepped and slammed the butt of his rifle into its jaw. It staggered, and he shot it point blank in the neck. Hot black smoke burst from its armor. It collapsed with a heavy thud. Another came, then another. Ethan kept moving. He didn't fight like a hero from old legends. He fought like a soldier who had already accepted death. That made him dangerous. That made him unshakable. The Queen's heart pounded as she watched him. One human against an army. Everyone else had run, but he stayed. She didn't understand why completely. But she knew this was what loyalty looked like. The enemy soldiers spread out, trying to surround him. They were fast, disciplined, and brutal. A clawed hand grazed Ethan's arm, cutting deep through his armor. Pain burned through his nerves, but he didn't fall. He turned, kicked, and shot again. The soldier went down. The Draviks started using their shock batons, long black weapons that hissed with blue energy. One struck the marble floor near Ethan's feet, sending sparks up his legs. He jumped back, breathing hard, sweat and blood mixing on his skin. Another soldier swung at him. Ethan ducked low, grabbed his knife, and drove it between the armor plates. The creature let out a horrible sound and collapsed. The commander watched all this in silence. It didn't join the fight. It didn't need to. It was measuring him, studying the way he moved, the way he refused to fall. The soldiers pressed in closer. Ethan was breathing harder now. His arm burned. His rifle was hot against his palms. He knew he couldn't hold them forever. But that didn't matter. This wasn't about forever. This was about the promise. The Queen stepped out from behind the pillar. Her voice echoed across the room. "Why?" she called out to the commander. "Why destroy everything?" The commander didn't answer. It only tilted its head, a silent shadow of war. Draviks didn't speak to their prey. They erased it. Ethan's rifle clicked, empty. He didn't hesitate. He threw it at the nearest soldier and charged with his knife. A Dravik swung its baton at him, but he moved under it like water. He stabbed up fast and hard, hitting the weak spot beneath the creature's chin. It fell backward, clawing at its throat. Two more rushed him. One hit him in the side. Pain shot through his ribs like fire. He gritted his teeth and slammed his elbow into the soldier's jaw, then grabbed the other's wrist and twisted until bone cracked beneath the armor. The sound echoed like snapping branches. For a moment, the soldiers hesitated. A single human had taken down too many of them too quickly. They weren't used to resistance like this. Most enemies screamed, most ran. This one stood. The commander finally stepped forward. The soldiers parted like water around a stone. Its armor was darker than the others. Its eyes burned brighter. Its claws gleamed. It didn't carry a weapon. It didn't need one. Ethan staggered slightly, wiping blood from his lip with the back of his hand. He met those burning red eyes and smiled a thin, dangerous smile. "Come on," he whispered. The commander moved fast, faster than the others. Its claws slashed through the air. Ethan ducked the first strike but felt the second tear through his shoulder armor. Pain exploded through him. He dropped to one knee, but he didn't let go of the knife. The commander struck again. Ethan rolled sideways, the blade missing his throat by inches. He came up behind it and slashed at its back, but the armor was too thick. The blow bounced off like steel against stone. The Queen shouted his name, but he didn't look at her. He couldn't. He was locked in a deadly dance now. The commander lunged. Ethan twisted. It grabbed him by the chest plate and threw him across the hall. He hit the floor hard, the impact shaking the marble beneath him. His lungs screamed for air. But he pushed himself up, blood dripping down his face. The commander walked slowly toward him, savoring the moment. Behind it, the remaining soldiers watched like predators circling prey. But Ethan wasn't prey. He spat blood onto the floor, gripped his knife tighter, and stood tall again. His body was broken, but his spirit wasn't. The Queen stepped forward then. Her eyes burned with something she had hidden for years. She raised her hand toward the throne. A soft blue light flickered beneath the floor, running like veins through the marble. The palace itself seemed to awaken. The commander paused, sensing something it did not understand. Ethan felt the floor hum under his boots. He glanced back at her. Her voice was steady, calm, and cold. "They will remember," she said. "They will remember the night a human stood." The commander lunged again. Ethan met it head-on, steel and claw, light and shadow. One man against the darkness, and for the first time the Draviks did not march forward easily. They met something that refused to fall. The battle for the Queen had begun. The floor of the throne room shook with each step the Dravik commander took. Its dark armor gleamed under the broken lights like wet stone. Smoke curled around its feet as if the air itself bent away from its presence. Ethan Cole stood at the center of the room, his knife tight in his hand, his shoulder bleeding, his breath hard and sharp. The air burned in his lungs, but his eyes were steady. Behind him, The queen stood tall, her cloak moving in the cold wind from the shattered doors. The soldiers had fallen silent. They were waiting for their leader to finish the job. To them, Ethan was just a man, small, tired human. Nothing more. But in this hall, something stronger than size or strength existed. A promise. The commander moved faster than anything Ethan had ever faced. One moment, it stood still. The next, its claws were cutting through the air where his throat had been a heartbeat before. He dropped low, rolled across the marble floor, and came up behind it. His knife slashed toward its back, but again, the armor was too thick. Sparks flew from the blade. The creature spun around, its claw cutting a clean line across Ethan's forearm. Hot pain flashed through his arm, but he didn't cry out. Pain was something he understood. Pain meant he was still alive. The commander attacked again. Its strikes were clean, practiced, merciless. Ethan blocked one with his forearm, dodged the next, and ducked the third by inches. But each movement cost him strength. He could feel the weight in his chest growing heavier with each breath. The queen's hands gripped the sides of the throne. She didn't speak. She didn't order him to stop. She knew that telling him to retreat would be meaningless. He wasn't fighting because of orders. He was fighting because of the night she pulled him out of the dark. A sharp blow hit Ethan's ribs. The sound echoed through the room. He staggered back, his boots slipping on the blood-slick floor. His vision flickered for a second. The commander followed, sensing weakness. Ethan gritted his teeth. Not yet. The commander lunged, claws raised high, ready to end it. Ethan dropped flat onto his back, kicked upward with both legs, and hit the creature's chest with a force that made its armor ring like a bell. It stumbled back 2 steps. For a moment, the soldiers shifted in confusion. Their commander had been pushed. Ethan pushed himself back to his feet. His lungs burned like fire, but a small grin crept across his face. "Yeah," he whispered. "You bleed too." The commander's red eyes narrowed. A low growl filled the hall. It lifted its clawed hand, and the other soldiers stepped forward again. 10, 15, maybe more. They began to circle him slowly. Ethan stood his ground. The queen's voice cut through the noise, soft but clear. "Ethan." He didn't turn to look at her, but the sound steadied his heart. Just hearing her say his name made the fear slip away. The soldiers moved as one, closing in from every side. Their boots struck the marble in a slow, rhythmic beat. They wanted to crush him completely. They wanted him to break. But breaking wasn't something Ethan did anymore. The first one came from the right. A baton cracked through the air toward his face. Ethan ducked and slammed his knife into the gap under its arm. The soldier let out a sharp sound and fell back. Another came from behind. He spun and kicked its knee out, then drove the knife into its neck joint. They came faster now. 3 at once. Ethan blocked one strike with his forearm, took a blow to the side, and pushed forward instead of back. He grabbed the nearest soldier by the neck and used it as a shield. The others hit their own ally with their batons. Ethan twisted and threw the body aside. His chest heaved with each breath. His vision blurred for half a second, but his hands kept moving like they were part of a machine built for this moment. The queen watched in silence. The smoke, the broken walls, the burning sky outside, it all felt far away. Right now, the world was reduced to one human and the army trying to erase him. The commander barked a short, guttural sound. The soldiers changed their formation. They spread wider, moving like a black tide across the floor. Ethan stepped back slowly, his boots scraping the marble. He reached the base of the queen's throne and stood between her and the enemy. She whispered from behind him, "Why do you keep standing?" He exhaled sharply. "Because they're not getting past me." The next wave hit harder. More soldiers. More speed. Ethan's body screamed with each impact. His left arm felt like fire. His legs trembled under him. But every time he should have fallen, he forced himself to move again. A baton hit his back. His breath caught. Another hit his ribs. He stumbled forward. The commander watched from a distance, silent as a shadow. It wanted to wear him down. It didn't need to rush. Time itself was its ally. But Ethan Cole wasn't just fighting with muscle. He was fighting with something heavier, every moment of his life that led to this night. Every breath he had begged for in the mines, every second of mercy the queen had given him. He roared, a sound that didn't sound like a single man, but like something bigger. He moved again. Knife, elbow, knee. His movements became sharp, brutal, alive. One soldier went down, then another, but they kept coming. A baton struck his thigh. His leg buckled. Another strike hit his shoulder. He hit the ground on one knee. For a heartbeat, the hall went silent, except for the breathing of the monsters closing in. The Queen took a step forward. "Ethan," he coughed, blood on his lips. "Stay back." "Ethan," he pushed himself up slowly, using the knife as support. His vision pulsed at the edges. But his eyes burned with the same blue fire that had made him step forward when everyone else ran. He looked at the commander. "I'm still here." The soldiers charged again. But something changed this time. Ethan didn't fight them like a soldier anymore. He fought them like a storm. He stopped defending and started attacking. A slash through a neck seam. A kick to a knee. A punch that shattered a mask. His movements were raw, reckless, and unstoppable. He didn't care about pain. Pain was already a part of him. Pain was familiar. The soldiers faltered for the first time. The rhythm of their attack broke. Fear wasn't something they understood, but confusion was. And confusion cracked their perfect machine. The commander finally moved again. It stepped forward, claws raised, and pushed its own soldiers aside. It wanted the kill for itself. Ethan stumbled, breathing hard, blood running down his arm. His knife dripped black from the enemy. He lifted his head, locked eyes with the commander, and smiled a tired but fearless smile. The creature lunged. Their clash was violent, fast, and brutal. Its claw swept toward him. He ducked and drove his knife into the soft joint at its elbow. It roared, a sound that made the broken glass in the windows vibrate. It swung again, hitting his shoulder. He fell backward, but rolled away before the next strike could crush him. He came up fast, grabbed a broken baton from the ground, and smashed it across the commander's jaw. Sparks flew. The creature staggered, not used to being touched, let alone hit. Ethan coughed blood but laughed through it. A rough, broken laugh. "You're not untouchable." The commander's roar shook the entire hall. The soldiers around them froze. For the first time, their leader bled. Ethan's legs trembled, but he pushed forward. He slammed into the creature with everything he had left. They hit the floor hard. The commander struck him across the face. His vision flashed white. He answered with a stab into its side. The two rolled across the floor, a blur of claws and blood. Ethan's breath grew shorter, but his eyes stayed locked on the enemy. He wasn't thinking anymore. He was just moving, fighting, existing in this single moment. The commander finally threw him off. He hit the ground, his back screaming in pain. His knife clattered away. The creature stood tall again, furious now. Its soldiers took a step forward. Then they stopped. Behind Ethan, the Queen had stepped fully down from her throne. Her silver crown caught the broken light, and a soft blue glow spread from her fingertips into the floor. A pulse of energy rippled through the marble, lighting the veins beneath the surface like rivers of starlight. The commander turned its head slightly. It had expected a helpless queen. It was wrong. Her voice filled the hall, cold and calm. "This is my home." The light pulsed again, brighter this time. The walls seemed to breathe. The air itself felt different. The Dravik soldiers shifted uneasily. Ethan pushed himself up on shaking arms. He didn't know what she was doing, but he trusted her. He always had. The commander snarled, stepped forward, and raised its claws. But this time, Ethan met it in the center of the hall before it could reach her. His hands closed around the knife once more. His breath came in short bursts. His chest burned. But his eyes never left its face. The enemy swung. Ethan didn't dodge. He caught the claw with both hands, his boots sliding across the floor. For a moment, it was just two forces locked together, metal against flesh, fire against will. Ethan's voice was low, but it carried through the room. "You're not taking her." The commander pushed harder. Its strength was overwhelming. Ethan's arms screamed. But something deep inside him roared louder than the pain. He stepped forward. The hall filled with the sound of two hearts. One human, one alien, colliding. The Queen's power pulsed one more time, lighting the floor beneath Ethan's feet. The soldiers stepped back. For the first time, the Draviks hesitated. Ethan didn't win the fight that night. But he stood, and sometimes standing is the beginning of victory. The throne room smelled of smoke and blood. The air was heavy with heat from blaster fire and the metallic scent of fear. Shattered pieces of gold and glass covered the floor, shining like broken stars. Ethan Cole stood in the center, his breath ragged, his body trembling. The knife in his hand dripped black liquid that hissed where it hit the floor. The Dravic commander was still on its feet, though blood seeped through a crack in its armor. Its glowing red eyes narrowed as it studied him. Behind it, the other soldiers waited in silence. None of them moved, as if the air itself had turned to stone. Ethan's hands shook, but not from fear. His strength was nearly gone, yet something inside him refused to break. Every breath hurt, every step burned, but his will was stronger than his body. He had promised the Queen he would stand, and he would. The Queen stood a few meters behind him. Her white cloak was stained with dust and ash. The crown on her head was cracked, but her posture was still straight, proud, unbending. She watched Ethan, and for the first time in her life, she saw what courage truly looked like. She had seen warriors fight before, thousands of them. But they always fought for glory, for pride, for conquest. This man fought for a promise, for something unseen. For her, the commander stepped forward. Its armor groaned with each movement. The light in its eyes burned hotter. The fight was not over. It would not stop until everything in this hall was dead. Ethan lifted his knife again. His vision swam, but he forced his eyes to stay open. He had no plan, no escape, only the simple, stubborn belief that he could hold the line one more minute. Just one more, the commander lunged. Ethan tried to dodge, but his legs gave out. The blow hit him across the chest, throwing him backward. He hit the floor hard, sliding through dust and broken glass. His ribs screamed. He could barely breathe. The creature roared, its shadow falling over him like a storm. It raised its claws for the final strike. Ethan didn't even have the strength to lift his arm. The Queen moved. She stepped forward faster than anyone expected. Her hand rose and light burst from her palm, a cold blue flame that filled the room with a humming sound. The commander froze mid-strike, its claws inches from Ethan's throat. The light expanded, spreading across the floor like water. Ethan blinked through the blur. The blue veins of energy from the palace walls were glowing brighter now. They crawled up the marble pillars, across the ceiling, through the cracks in the glass. The entire palace was coming alive. The Queen's voice echoed through the hall, calm and sharp at the same time. Enough. The commander stepped back, its claws trembling. The light made its armor flicker. The other Dravics hissed, shielding their eyes. The blue glow grew stronger until it filled every shadow. Ethan pushed himself up slowly, gasping. "What is that?" The Queen didn't look at him. Her eyes were pure light now, the same blue as the palace veins. "This world was built on old power," she said softly. "Power I swore never to use again." Her voice changed, deeper, older, filled with something ancient. "But tonight I make a choice." She raised both hands and the light surged. The air vibrated. The Dravic soldiers staggered back, their armor sizzling where the glow touched them. The Queen's power poured out in waves, wrapping around her like living fire. Ethan could only watch. He had heard stories of her people's old magic, but he had never believed them. Now he did. Every part of the room pulsed with life. The broken walls, the shattered glass, even the dust itself. The commander roared and charged through the light. It swung its claws at her, but the moment they touched the blue energy, the claws burned away like smoke. The creature screamed, stumbling backward. The light spread through its body, cracking the armor like dry earth. The Queen took one slow step forward. "You wanted a queen," she said quietly. "Now you face one." The energy exploded outward. The Dravic soldiers tried to retreat, but the wave hit them before they could reach the door. Their armor shattered. Their bodies fell one by one, turning to ash before they hit the floor. Ethan shielded his face from the blinding glow. His ears rang with the sound of pure power, a deep hum that felt like the heartbeat of the planet itself. Then, silence. When he lowered his arm, the light had faded. The hall was filled with smoke and faint blue dust floating in the air like tiny stars. The Dravics were gone. Only the commander remained, half kneeling, its armor cracked open, steam rising from its wounds. The queen stood before it, her breathing calm, her eyes still glowing. "Leave," she said. "Tell your masters that Virelia still stands." The commander raised its head slowly. Its red eyes flickered like dying fire. "You cannot win," it rasped. "You are one world." "We are many." The queen looked down at it. "Then tell them to bring all they have. We will still be here." She lowered her hand. The blue light pulsed once more, and the commander vanished in a burst of ash. Ethan leaned against a pillar, struggling to stay upright. His whole body ached. His vision blurred at the edges. But he smiled. "Remind me not to make you angry," he muttered. The queen turned toward him. The glow in her eyes softened until she looked almost human again. "You should rest," she said. He laughed weakly. "Rest can wait." She moved to him, kneeling beside him on the broken marble. "You kept your word." He looked at her, blood on his lips, and said, "You gave me something to believe in." For a moment, there was no war, no fear, just two people sitting among ruins, breathing the same heavy air. The queen reached out and touched his shoulder. The blue light spread softly through her fingers, closing the worst of his wounds. The warmth sank into his skin like sunlight through cold water. Ethan exhaled slowly. "You didn't have to do that." "I did," she said quietly. "Because now I understand." "Understand what?" Her voice was calm, almost sad. "Why you stayed," he frowned. "You thought I wouldn't?" "I thought you were loyal because of duty, but now I see it was choice." She looked around at the destroyed hall, and I see what loyalty truly means. Outside, the sky burned with the light of retreating ships. The battle above the palace was ending. The Dravic fleet was pulling back, their lines broken by the Queen's unleashed power, but it wasn't victory yet. They both knew that. The Dravics would return. They always did. Ethan stood, his body still shaking. He picked up his ruined rifle and checked the power cell out of habit. "They'll come back," he said quietly. "Yes," the Queen answered. "And when they do, they will find a world that no longer kneels." She turned toward the window. The stars were fading behind smoke, but their light still reached the ground. "Every story of my people begins with loss," she said. "But maybe ours will begin with a promise," Ethan smiled faintly. "Then I guess we're writing the first chapter." The Queen looked at him. "Together?" He nodded. "Always." For a long time they stood in silence, watching the smoke drift across the stars. The palace around them was broken, but it still stood, just like them. Far away, a distant thunder echoed across the sky. The Dravic ships were leaving orbit, their engines glowing like dying suns. The Queen closed her eyes and whispered, "They think this world belongs to them." Ethan glanced at her. "They'll learn." A faint smile touched her lips. "Yes, they will learn." The floor trembled once, then stilled. The last sparks of blue energy sank back into the marble veins. The palace lights flickered, weaker now, but still alive. Ethan holstered his knife and exhaled slowly. The adrenaline faded, leaving behind exhaustion and quiet pride. He looked at the Queen again. "You saved me twice now," he said. She met his eyes. "No, this time we saved each other." Outside, the dawn was beginning to rise, faint and pale through the smoke. The first light touched the cracked walls, turning the ruins golden. The war wasn't over. The enemy would return. But for now, there was peace. The Queen walked toward the shattered doorway and looked out at the horizon. The wind carried the smell of ash and rain. Ethan followed, standing beside her. Below them, the city still burned, but in the distance, lights were returning, small, flickering signs of life. People who had fled were coming back. Ethan watched silently. "They'll rebuild." "Yes," she said. "Because you showed them how to stand." He didn't answer. He didn't need to. The silence between them said everything. For the first time in his life, Ethan Cole felt something he hadn't felt even before the war, hope, behind them. The palace lights glowed one last time before dimming to rest. The Queen turned away from the dawn and said softly, "The promise is kept." And Ethan smiled. Until the end. The sun rose over the blackened sky like a slow-burning torch. Smoke curled above the palace towers, reaching into the pale light of dawn. The night of battle was over, but the scars remained. Shattered walls leaned against one another, the once bright marble burned black at the edges. The ground still held the memory of fire. Ethan Cole stood at the edge of the throne room, his hand resting on the cracked frame of the doorway. Beyond it, the great city stretched out in silence. What was once full of shining towers and golden bridges now lay quiet and broken. Yet here and there tiny lights flickered to life, lanterns, torches, beacons. Survivors were returning. He felt the cold wind brush his face. It smelled of ash and wet stone. The weight of everything that had happened pressed down on his shoulders like armor he could not take off. He was exhausted, so tired that even standing hurt. But inside, where once there had been nothing but emptiness, something steady had grown, a flame that refused to die. Behind him, the queen moved quietly across the cracked floor. Her cloak dragged through the dust, leaving faint blue sparks where the ancient power still hummed beneath the marble. She stopped beside him and looked out over the broken city. "It lived," she whispered. Ethan glanced at her. "What?" She nodded toward the horizon where the first sunlight touched the highest towers. "Virelia, it lived through the night." Her voice was soft, but there was strength in it too. The same strength that had poured through the palace when she made her choice. Her crown was still broken. Her face was lined with exhaustion. But her eyes burned like they carried all the stars in the sky. Ethan turned his gaze back toward the city. People were emerging from the ruins now. Families, soldiers, workers. Their clothes were torn, their faces marked with soot. But they were alive. Some looked up at the palace and saw the smoke, the broken towers, the open gates, and they began to walk toward it. "They're coming back," Ethan said quietly. "Yes," the queen replied. They saw the light. He knew what she meant. They had run when the enemy came. They had believed the palace would fall. But then something happened, something they could not ignore. One man stayed. The queen unleashed the fire beneath the stone. And now, the people returned not out of fear, but out of hope. Ethan leaned against the doorway, feeling the ache in his ribs with every breath. "This place will never be the same," he said. "No," she agreed. "It will be stronger," he gave a small, tired laugh. "Stronger is a lot of work." She looked at him then, really looked at him. Her eyes softened. "And you, Ethan Cole, will you still be here when the work begins?" He raised an eyebrow. "You planning to get rid of me already?" She almost smiled, but it was the kind of smile that carried the weight of an entire kingdom. "No, but the world will remember what happened last night, and so will the enemy." Ethan lowered his gaze to the floor. In the silence that followed, the wind blew through the broken walls, carrying the sounds of distant footsteps, the sound of people gathering again. "They'll come back," Ethan said, his voice low. "The Draviks." "Yes," she said. "And when they do, they will find something different." He turned toward her. "What's that?" "Us," she said simply. For a moment, they stood side by side, saying nothing. The queen's people had always seen her as a symbol, distant, untouchable. But now she was something more. She wasn't just their ruler. She was the woman who stood with a human against a storm. And Ethan. Ethan was no longer a stranger in a foreign world. He was part of it now. She stepped down from the doorway and began walking through the ruined hall. Her boots crunched over broken crystal. Ethan followed, limping slightly, each step a reminder of the battle's cost. The hall that had once gleamed with polished stone and golden banners was now dark and scarred. Blaster marks streaked the pillars. The great throne was cracked down the center, but it still stood. Just like they did, workers and guards began to filter in from the lower halls. Their faces were pale, their eyes wide when they saw the destruction. But when they saw Ethan and the queen standing together, something shifted in their expressions. Their fear didn't vanish, but it bent beneath something stronger: respect. One soldier knelt, then another, then more. Not out of forced loyalty, not because of old rules, but because they had witnessed something they would never forget. Ethan shifted uncomfortably. "I'm not really good with all this kneeling stuff." The queen glanced at him, And for the first time since the night began, she smiled. Neither am I. She raised a hand and the people slowly rose again. She didn't need them on their knees. She needed them on their feet. Ethan stopped near the center of the hall and looked at the cracked floor beneath him. The same spot where he had faced the commander. His blood was still there, dark and dried. For a moment, he let the silence sink in. He hadn't expected to survive. He hadn't expected anything at all. But now, he realized something strange. He didn't feel like an outsider anymore. The queen walked past him and climbed the steps to the throne. She didn't sit. She turned to face the crowd gathering in the hall. Her voice when it came was clear. "You ran because you were afraid," she said. "I do not blame you for that. Fear is not weakness. But what we do after fear, that is what builds the future." The crowd listened in silence. Dust swirled in the shafts of sunlight falling through the shattered ceiling. "Last night," she continued, "one man stood when no one else did. He was not of our kind. He did not have the strength of an army, but he stood. And because of that, we are still here." Her eyes swept over them, steady and sharp. "Virelia will not fall. Not to fear, not to shadows." Ethan shifted under the weight of their eyes. He didn't like being the center of attention, but something in him understood why this moment mattered. This wasn't about him alone. It was about the promise behind what he had done. The queen lowered her head slightly. "This is not the story of a queen or an army. This is the story of a promise kept." The hall was silent. And then, softly at first, the sound of hands striking together began. Applause. It spread through the crowd like a spark catching fire. Ethan felt the heat rise in his face, but he didn't step back. He wasn't a hero. But to them, he had become something more. A symbol of what it meant to stay. Later, when the sun climbed higher and the workers began clearing the ruins, Ethan sat on a low step outside the palace gates. His armor was still stained with blood, and his body ached like it was made of broken glass. He watched as groups of people returned to their homes. Children carried water. Men and women stacked fallen beams. Life was moving again, fragile but determined. The queen joined him, sitting without a word. For a few moments, they simply watched. "They're rebuilding already," Ethan said finally. "They have something to believe in," she replied. He glanced at her. "You mean you?" She shook her head slowly. "No, you," he laughed softly. "I'm just a soldier." Her eyes turned toward the horizon. "No. You're the reason this world stood one more night." He didn't know what to say to that. He had never wanted glory. All he had wanted was to keep a promise. A cool breeze passed over them. The sun burned away some of the smoke, revealing the distant mountains. Birds, real ones, flew above the wreckage for the first time since the battle began. "Will they come back?" he asked. "Yes," she said. "The Draviks never stop." He nodded slowly. "Then neither will we," she smiled faintly. "Spoken like the last defender." He chuckled. "I didn't choose that title." "No," she said. "It chose you." For a long time they sat there, two figures in a broken world that was still breathing. Around them, the sound of hammers and voices grew louder. It was not the sound of fear anymore. It was the sound of people rebuilding what they had almost lost. Far beyond the sky, somewhere in the dark, the Draviks would be gathering again. But now they would remember this night. They would remember that one human stood against their storm. They would remember the queen who chose to fight, and next time they would not be facing one man alone. Ethan Cole looked at the horizon and exhaled slowly. "I guess we've started something." "Yes," she said. "Something they can't burn." As the first full light of day broke across the city, the queen rose and extended her hand to him, not as a ruler, but as someone who shared the same fire. Ethan took it. Together they stepped forward, past the ruined gates, into the light of a world that refused to die. The legend of the last defender had begun.